This stuff is fun to watch, guys. It's like wrestling or something. Like, I've got no horse in the race, so to say. But I'm tired of just being bored with Canadian politics and sort of hands in the air. I think that we need change, and the way that we start changing things is knowing what is going on. Yeah, I think we're getting ready to go here, guys.
Colleagues, before we proceed,
let's check it out.
The new speaker, sometimes I don't
This
know
is
where
our new
everybody
speaker,
actually sits in the
Greg
House.
Fergus.
For declarations from members, I'd like to remind all members to please be in your seat to make your declaration. There was one case today, but the new car smell is okay. So I need you guys to make
making
sure that you take care
a
of
joke
that, and
again
you stay
about a
in your
car.
seat.
He
Go to
said
your seats before
no
making
dents
that
on the
statement.
first day, and that was on the other day. Now I think this is day
Oral
3.
Questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Sounds like Ian Handemansing. Let's go, Pierre Poilievre. Let's get it fired up. Let's get it going.
After 8 years of this Prime Minister, it's not worth the cost. For example, a month ago, after a big photo op, he promised to bring down the cost of a Thanksgiving dinner. But we can see today nothing other than another photo op. But Canadians can't eat photo ops, Mr. Speaker. They need turkey. They need other food to eat. And what has gone up since this government took office by almost 70%, the cost of turkey. Will they reverse those increases?
I just hope Trudeau showed up
Thanksgiving?
today. He's been playing hooky a lot.
The Honourable Minister.
Uh,
I'd like to thank the
This
leader
guy's
of the
not
opposition
bad,
for his
but
question. What Canadians
where's
know
our
is
leader?
not to take his advice on economics. The last piece of advice he has was to
Good
invest
one.
in
Good
crypto.
line.
And now
Good
he's
one.
suggesting to Canadians that they should buy turkey that costs $120. I think they can get it a lot cheaper than that, Mr. Speaker. If the Conservatives want to do something for Canadians, they should vote for C-56
Good
and
on
help
you, Francois.
Canadians now.
Good on you, Francois. Don't just take it laying down. What's Poilievre going to say to
Honourable Leader of
that?
the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that this minister is the turkey in this joke.
Oh,
When you look at flyers,
Who's the turkey?
you can see
He
in
said
the
turkeys
last
were
years
120 bucks, though.
of
I don't
the
think they are.
Conservative rule, turkey was $1.49 a pound, and now it's $2.49. It's a 67% increase after eight
$20
years
turkey
of
would
this
have to be
Prime
pretty
Minister
big
and his
turkey.
carbon taxes, which
math.
are causing costs to go up for farmers and for truckers and so on, and ultimately for consumers of groceries. Will the government reverse these exorbitant increases by Thanksgiving?
Not your
yes
best performance,
or no,
Pierre. That
in
wasn't
4
your best
days?
one, because the math on that, when you said $120 turkey the other day, doesn't add up.
Before I turn it over to the
Come on,
minister
Greg.
to answer the question, I'd like to remind all members that it's important.
Nice
We
tie. I
shouldn't
like that.
compare a member to
Oh, come on.
to an animal, for example. The Honourable Minister.
Oh, shit. Come on, guys.
Thank you for your intervention, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to commend you on your new role. This was my first chance to do so.
He's
This
pretty
is
good.
no joke, Mr. Speaker. I hope Canadians watching today realize there's no joke here. We came up with a 5-point plan.
It's pretty good.
We called on the major grocery chains to do their fair share to help Canadians. Secondly, we created a specific office to help Canadians on issues of shrinkflation. Third, we want a grocery code of conduct signed. Fourth, we want to help equalize bargaining power. And
Do you think the 5 major grocers are going to decide to do any of that?
8 years.
They don't
this
make
Prime
the rules,
Minister's
they're not
not
gonna
worth
sign
the
it.
cost of food. For example, the price of turkey is up at Loblaws by 67% after 8 years of this Prime Minister's carbon taxes. And all they offered, since they promised to bring prices down by Thanksgiving, is a code of conduct an office and a photo op. You
Not
can't
worth the
eat
cost.
any of those three things. They won't
it's
be
gonna
on
say
the Thanksgiving dinner table. So what will they do in the next 4 days to reverse the 67% increase in the cost of a turkey at Loblaws, just like they promised they would, Mr. Speaker?
Why would they make that promise? It was a silly promise to make, like a month. Like, how are you going to do that?
Mr. Speaker, we will take no lessons from this conservative, Mr. Speaker.
Whoa, Francois getting them fired up.
The leader, Mr. Speaker, advised Canadians was to buy crypto, Mr. Speaker, and now he's suggesting to Canadians to buy a turkey at $120. I found a butterball for him, Mr. Speaker, $30.
He's getting them fired up, guys. He's getting them fired up. Pretty fun. Way to go, Francois. It's going. Oh, Greg doesn't like that, though. He's going to lay down the law now. Oh, boring Greg. With that Ian Hannamancing voice.
Order.
Listen to Ian Hannamancing. Listen.
Order. All right, we got the first scratch. I'd like to remind
Car joke
members,
again. It's gone too far.
all
That's enough.
members,
Drop
please,
the
that
car joke.
props are not acceptable in the House of Commons. It's about the debate.
Come on. Let them have some fun.
Vous avez...
The Honourable Minister.
Shopping for the leader of the opposition to help him. But, Mr. Speaker, if they want to do something for Canadian, not just asking
guy's
questions, but
explosive,
do
man.
something. Vote for FISA C56, Mr. Speaker. It's going to help Canadians. It's going to
that's true.
stabilize price in Canada. And it's going to bring competition in this country. That's what we need. It's for them to hack, Mr. Speaker.
Ooh, he's hot, guys. He's hot today. It is fun, see? It's fun.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Fast that Canadians didn't want champagne for Thanksgiving. They just want some food. And I did a little bit of
grub.
price shopping on that for him. In the last days of the Conservative government, the price for a pound of turkey was $1.49. And the flyers today show it's $2.49, a 70% increase. And I might add that the picture of the turkey during the Conservative years was a big, plump, beautiful bird, whereas right now it's a skimpy, shrimpy little thing that looks like it's been taxed to death. Mr. Speaker, why would
like
they get
open
off the
mic
back
night
of the turkey so that we
for
can have
Pierre
a nice dinner
Poilievre.
for Thanksgiving?
He's a pretty funny guy, man. Politician, so watch out. But it's fun.
Speaker,
Get him going again.
the opposition
Get
can
him
have
going.
as much as he wants. But one thing I can tell you, Canadians have no fun these days, Mr. Speaker. Because they know. Because they know.
Make the crypto joke again. Hey, no. Put him in his place. Man, this guy's pretty good. Technology minister, I believe. They're having a good time in the house. Oh, Greg's going to step in and ruin the fun, though.
Settle down.
Settle down, man. This
Alors,
guy. Come on,
gonna
bud.
have minute.
The Honourable Minister.
Friendly looking, though, with
23
a
seconds
very
left.
pretty bow
Mr. Speaker, I
tie.
hope that I have
I
as
like
much
that.
energy to support our bill, Mr. Speaker, to make a difference in the life of Canadians. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is not a joke, Mr. Speaker. Canadians expect action. That's what we've taken this morning with a 5-item action plan to help stabilize price in Canada. And if the Conservatives want to keep laughing and make jokes, Mr. Speaker, tell that to Canadians, which expect them to approve Bill 66, reform competition, lower prices in Canada, and make sure that Canadians can have what they deserve from the situation.
Yeah. Ooh. So hot, he burnt his tongue.
Gonna have député de...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Minister
go.
accidentally
Get
told
him.
the truth there for a second.
Whoops.
He said Canadians aren't having any fun, and he's got that right, because after 8 years, this Prime Minister is not
better. He's making up for it
worth
now.
the cost. He says we should energetically support his bills. Well, he's been forcing, and his Prime Minister has been forcing Canadians to support Liberal bills for 8 years, and the bill is way too high. Food prices are up more than 20% in 2 years, the fastest increase in interest rates in monetary history. Why won't they stop sending Canadians the bill and let Canadians afford to eat, heat, and house themselves this Thanksgiving?
All right. We're kind of hoping that maybe Sean Fraser, the Birdman, gets in there. He's fun.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the leader of the opposition He's coming actually to some sense. He realized that the best way to help Canadians is to support the government, Mr. Speaker, because this is a time where all parliamentarians needs to come together, Mr. Speaker. That's why we presented a plan that's going to help to stabilize prices in Canada, that's going to increase competition in this country, and it's going to take measures to help Canadians. Mr. Speaker, if he wants to give a gift to Canadians for Thanksgiving, why don't he support C-56 and show Canadians that he can do something for them?
It's running out of energy, I think. Used it all up.
The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, it's funny. It's always complicated for
This
Liberals
is fun,
to
guys.
defend French in Quebec. Take, for example, the Minister
Like,
of Immigration.
subscribe, we're having
Yesterday
fun.
in committee, he simply couldn't acknowledge a basic fact that all the indicators point to: French is in decline in Quebec. No way. It's like James Bond under torture, refusing to talk. Oddly enough, it reminded us of the debates over C13, the official languages reform. The minister was one of the West Island Liberals who fought against better protection for French.
sour he
Is
is,
that a
man.
coincidence? The Honourable Minister. Mr.
Yes.
Speaker,
Those actors.
we need to be careful.
Most interesting
with
man in the
the
world.
Statistics. More people than ever before are able to speak French. But if you're talking about the language used at home, when I was young, I spoke Spanish at home, but I'm a francophone.
Interesting.
I spoke Spanish at home, but at school, at hockey, at work, I always spoke French, Mr. Speaker. So Bill 101 is working in Quebec. That's what proves it. The Bloc can cry foul, but the fact is that there are more French speakers than ever before, and this government will always endeavor to do more every day, and that there will be more French speakers every day. The honourable member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, we're talking about the Minister of Immigration here. The federal government increased the number of temporary immigrants to Quebec by 150,000 people this year. Quebec is worried about its settlement capacity, and the Quebec immigration minister discussed this with the federal minister, but said that the concept of settlement capacity was not part of his thinking. The same minister who has all the trouble in the world admitting French
he can
is
read.
threatened, he doesn't recognize that settlement capacity
read, it
has
sucks.
to be part of his
Pay
thinking on
attention.
immigration. Do we
When they
really
read,
have to
it's no
explain
fun.
that to him? The honourable minister. Mr. Speaker, the figure the member opposite is referring to
Mark Miller.
is mother tongue that excludes me and a whole bunch of other ministers. I am a proud Quebecer, proud of being so, proud to say so, but the statistic he's referring to is mother tongue. But we should be proud of the high number of people who can speak French in Quebec, and the member should be ashamed of using statistics the way he is. I'm a proud Quebecer and a proud speaker of French.
Did a politician just try to manipulate
The honourable member
statistics?
for Burnaby South. Thank you.
Uh-oh. Here he
21
comes.
months since food prices
Meat
have outpaced
in the house.
general inflation. Almost, and the Prime Minister
We used to
wasn't
have
willing
such
to do
hope.
anything until he started falling behind in the polls. That's
Coalition.
2 years that Canadians have been struggling because this government's unwilling to take on the real problem, which is corporate greed. Now,
This sounds
will the
true.
government admit that their plan to scramble and try to do something is to save themselves, not Canadians?
He's a handsome man. Just had great hope for him. Did you? Did you
Actually,
used to
Mr.
care?
Speaker, I beg to differ. We actually have been
good,
putting
Anita.
in place
Looking
programs
sharp.
to support Canadians, bill after bill, law after law. 11 million Canadians with the grocery
going to the
rebate,
paper.
Mr. Speaker. 4.2 million Canadians with the workers' benefit. 6 million Canadians in increasing old age security. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because our government believes in investing in Canadians time after time, and we will continue to do that to build a stronger Canada. Thank you.
Watching this stuff makes me feel a little bit
honourable member
patriotic
for Burnaby
somehow.
South.
It might be the
Courage to take on corporate
that
greed
it's
when
Canadian.
it comes to the price of groceries,
Focuses on our
nor when
issues.
it comes to the privatization of our healthcare system. Shoppers Drug Mart, owned by Galen Weston, is rapidly expanding an
Galen
American-style
Weston.
for-profit healthcare delivery in our country. And the government's nowhere to be seen. Last election, the Prime Minister said he would defend public universal healthcare, and now he calls privatization innovation. So what's the plan? Wait another 2 years and then ask Galen Weston nicely to stop?
Good question, Jimmy. Not a fan of Galen Weston, guys. Boo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And together we've made huge progress
Bow
in
tie
reducing drug
day.
costs from Canadians by working together on bulk purchasing. $3.5 billion less is now spent by Canadians by reducing those costs. We need and must do much more. That's why we're continuing to work not only with the party opposite, the New Democrats, but with all parties with a strategy on rare diseases by introducing legislation on pharmacare. Together we can make sure that Canadians aren't faced with the impossible choice of essentials or the medicine they need.
Yeah. I don't know about this pharmacare, guys. Those drug companies have a little bit too much control on what they do.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, even Thanksgiving dinner has become unaffordable. Food banks across the country are overwhelmed. With Thanksgiving approaching, some food banks have made the tough decision of cutting back on distributing food because they just don't have enough to go around. The Liberals' carbon taxes have driven up the cost of Thanksgiving staples like potatoes by 77%. Will this Prime Minister reverse this 77% hike on Thanksgiving food before Thanksgiving, as he promised? Yes or no?
It's too dry, lady. Can't be that dry if you're reading from paper. Come on. Come on.
Mr. Speaker,
All right, here we
if
go.
the Conservative member wants to see
That
grocery
top pops
prices
into the
lowered,
screen. Holy
I
cow.
hope that she
That
asks
is
her
blue.
leader why it is that the Conservatives continue to delay the legislation that is before this House. In fact, just this morning, I was so pleased to see the member from Mission Misqui Fraser
put me to
Canyon
sleep,
say
these
that
two.
he supports Bill C-56. And I wonder
Have an
if
arm wrestle
other
instead.
Conservatives can convince their leader to support this bill, because Canadians are counting on all of us in this House to help stabilize grocery prices.
It's very, very calm. It's so you almost can't hear what she's saying. It's in one ear or the other.
Canadians are counting
Same
on
old.
immediate relief
Come on,
before
Leslie
Thanksgiving.
Lewis.
People are rationing food across this country. According to Food Banks Canada, people are making impossible choices between paying their rent
This
or
guy
putting
behind me
food
is
on
falling
the table
asleep.
for their families.
He's
This
actually gonna
Liberal
fall asleep, the
NDP
guy behind me,
government
look.
continues their inflationary spending, which has caused
And
grocery prices
over there, see
to
beside her,
increase by
looks like Nicole Sullivan.
94%,
Matt TV.
as in the case with lettuce. Canadians are realizing that this Prime Minister just isn't worth the cost. Will this
All of
Prime
that for
Minister
that?
keep his
Come on,
promise
lady.
and reverse his punishing?
And they cut you off, Leslie. Talk too long, too boring. Get it together, woman. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, there are important measures that can be immediately
Her hair
implemented
looks
in
so
order
curly.
to help Canadians. But the problem is what we hear from the
Dark.
Conservatives
That's the
are
darkest
very
hair I've ever
sincere
seen.
concerns in question period. But then when it comes time to vote, Mr. Speaker, when it comes time to debate legislation, what we're seeing are procedural delay tactics and Conservatives voting against the interests of Canadians. Mr. Speaker, I would urge everybody in this House to act in order to support Canadians, stabilize prices, and get more homes built in this country.
She's trying, guys. Give her a little credit. She's trying.
This will not be a happy
All right,
Thanksgiving
this guy
for
can be
many
fun
Canadian
sometimes.
families because food prices are absolutely out of control. And the NDP leader just said that food inflation has outpaced inflation over the last 20 months, which is coincidentally the length of the Liberal NDP coalition. What?
Hey, got to get rid of this coalition.
But the
It doesn't
sad
work.
fact is this: Canadian families are going to have to make the hard choice: feed their family or pay their rent. Will the Prime Minister finally recognize the damage he's done to Canada, keep his promise so they have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
Do you have a party that you favor? Do you favor the NDP, the Liberals, Conservatives, Bloc Québécois, Green
Thank
Party?
you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said, we're taking concrete steps. They're on the
Come
table
on, Rachel.
right here in the
Get it
House. And I
going.
don't understand how the Conservatives can pretend to be sincere about their concern for Canadians while at the same time they're using procedural tactics to try to prevent us from helping Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's beyond me. If the Conservatives want to be there for Canadians,
that's what
they should pull up their socks and get down to work and help us help Canadians.
It's getting better. Good one, Rachel.
Mr. Speaker, only a party whose leader said, "I admire the basic dictatorship of China," would say legitimate debate about a government piece of legislation is so inconvenient and an obstruction. That is a disgraceful comment and an opinion. But it's not a surprise from these Liberals whose leader admires the basic dictatorship. Mr. Speaker, everything they've done has done nothing to improve food affordability. After 8 long years of this Liberal government, Canadians can't pay for food. Will the Prime Minister keep his promise so Canadians can have an affordable Thanksgiving dinner?
Time is short, Prime Minister, if you're going to keep that promise. Time is getting really short. This just in, little Francois had to go to the hospital to be rehydrated. He exhausted himself.
Explain and debate what it is about cutting GST on the construction of new homes that they actually disagree with. What is it about strengthening competition laws to stabilize grocery prices here in Canada that they disagree with? Because I haven't heard a single argument in debate that has convinced any Canadian in this country that we shouldn't proceed with those measures, Mr. Speaker. And if the Conservatives want to help Canadians, they should be sincere in their actions. They should vote in the interests of Canadians.
She's the opposite of Francois. He blows it all like at one go, and she sort of works into it.
Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker,
come on, Luke.
We would have
Luke
voted
usually comes with some fire.
for scrapping the carbon tax, which would have immediately affected all Canadians' pocketbooks. But instead, the Prime Minister made a big media show of saying he had brought together the food giants so that Canadians could afford their Thanksgiving dinners. He made that promise to Canadians, but food prices have increased, potatoes by 67% and so on. There's only 4 days left to bring prices down in time for Thanksgiving. After 8 years of empty promises, will he or won't he keep his promise to make Thanksgiving dinner affordable?
Are you going to be able to afford a turkey dinner this year?
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are very selective in choosing their facts.
In her house coat again.
But one thing they never talk about is the fact that what is driving up food prices is also climate change, because this year we had the worst harvests in almost all of Quebec and Canada, in all the regions. And it's so important to put a price on pollution and to combat climate change. And if there's one group who knows that, it's farmers. So we want to help farmers and Canadians. And if they do, they should be supporting our efforts to fight climate change.
Climate change is the problem. They're not going at it the right way.
Speaker, people in Chambly don't know how they're going to pay for their Thanksgiving turkey. Meanwhile, the leader of the Bloc Liberal coalition thinks he's the head of Quebec diplomacy, spending thousands of dollars on travel and greenhouse gas emissions to attend fancy cocktail parties to talk about what? The cost of living, rising rents, violence in Montreal, carbon tax hikes? No, he went to talk about independence. If you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it. Will the Prime Minister call his Bloc ambassador back home and tell him how he's going to keep his promise to lower food prices in time for Thanksgiving?
Proud of himself. Good job, I guess. Shouldn't be proud of yourself.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I think today's debate requires a bit of seriousness from the Conservatives. We're talking about the challenges Quebecers and Canadians are facing. The cost of living has gone up recently, and today we have taken steps. We have legislation to help Canadians lower the cost of rent and groceries, but the Conservatives are voting against everything we do, everything to fight climate change and so on. They should support C-56 so that we can stabilize grocery prices, Mr. Speaker.
Phoebe in the back liked it.
The honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert.
All right, guys. Clown circus.
Speaker,
This
good
guy's a
news.
finger sniffer.
Quebec
I've
will
caught
be
him.
matching the federal contribution of $900 million
Clown circus,
for housing.
guys.
There's just one detail, one small detail. The
Clown
money is still stuck
circus.
in the
See
federal
that?
coffers
That's what
because
it is.
the feds are trying to impose conditions on Quebec. This morning, Quebec's premier said that the clock
like
is
his shirt,
ticking.
though.
The agreement must be reached before November 7th. If it's to find its
Animated.
way into the economic update. Will the government put an end to this quibbling and immediately announce it will pay Quebec
Nearsighted
its
as well.
share
He has to
of
get
the
real
$900
close.
million? The clock is ticking.
Tick-tock.
None I have.
I don't think it's going to happen, though. Here we go. Those Ackies.
That's great, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, we don't need threats or shouting or protests
good.
from the Bloc. I'll use a word they don't like much. It begins with a C and ends with it's complaining.
Okay.
They're here to complain and to squabble and to pick
He was
fights.
going to do. He's
But
interesting.
the fact is that we have negotiated $900 million for Quebec, and those negotiations will bear fruit because we will always stand up for
Fired
Quebec.
up. World's most interesting
The
man.
honourable member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, we're not the only ones. There are 10,000 students grumbling about the federal government right now in Quebec. Quebec's finance minister met with the deputy prime minister, and listen to what he said. I repeated to her that it was urgent to sign the agreement, but the federal government is attaching strings, and that's unacceptable to us. Mr. Speaker, the announced that Quebec is doubling its contribution is supposed to be good news, but as long as the federal government is quibbling,
He's adamant.
that means
He's
it's
fine.
not $900 million, but actually $1.8 billion lying dormant while we wait for Ottawa. When are they going to get down to work and announce that this money is coming?
Everybody, he's popular too. He gets some applause.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Oh yes, here we go.
Mr. Speaker, as
Here we go.
the member knows
Sean
full
Fraser's
well,
a dancing
I've
man.
been in discussion with my Quebec counterpart
Go, Sean.
with a view to reaching a deal to flow federal funds for housing construction. We understand the priority of Quebec City.
Trusted with the responsibility of investing hundreds of millions of dollars. We do it sincerely, working alongside our provincial partners and ensure that Canadians receive the results of that funding.
What do you think of Sean, guys? He's handsome, man.
Honourable
He's
member
well
for
spoken too, but
Longueuil-Saint
he's got this
Hubert.
funny way
Mr.
that he
Speaker,
moves.
Do you know why Quebec's the only province matching
his match.
Ottawa's $900 million
Dennis
investment
True.
in housing? Because Quebec is the only province in Canada that invests in housing. Quebecers have made the progressive choice to invest in housing themselves. And instead of being held up as an example, the federal government is holding back $900 million in a classic
And it's fun.
flag-waving
It's pretty
dispute for which they alone have the solution. It's enough's enough. Frapperu is in Ottawa today. This would be a great opportunity to announce that the squabbling is over and a deal has been reached. When will the government stop jerking us around and give us the $900 million?
Let's get it going.
None I have.
What do
The
you think of
Honourable
that?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What do we
the
have
only
here?
thing we agree on
Also has very dark hair.
between me and my colleague and Quebec is that there's urgency. And with Quebec City, we agreed in 2015 on a number of things, and we vote together for Quebec. What's bothering the Bloc right now is that they're not at the bargaining table, and they never will be. On the other side, there are Conservatives who want to take money away from the municipalities and don't trust the provinces. Mr. Speaker, we're going to work together with Quebec and come to a deal on housing.
Oh, is that what we're doing? I don't think.
The honourable member from Central Okanagan, Similkameen, Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister,
Right.
it is
Nice,
clear
huh?
that he is
Nice.
not worth the cost. He promised
Boy.
Canadians an affordable Thanksgiving, but all they are seeing are longer lines at the food bank. This NDP Liberal government is throwing off more crumbs than a stale loaf of bread. This half-baked
good.
loaf of higher deficits and carbon taxes is making it harder for
Here's a
Canadians to
tip.
afford Thanksgiving.
Get off the
Will
paper.
the Prime Minister deliver lower lower grocery prices, or admit he made a turkey of a promise, one that's empty on the inside?
Would you need a piece of paper if that was all you were going to do with your day?
L'honorable ministre de la Santé.
don't think that it would.
Mind back 8 years ago when
2.4
million more Canadians were in poverty, and we can ask what the government of Stephen Harper and the official opposition leader did at that point in time. They didn't do anything. And right now, as the global challenge, and yes, Canada has one of the lowest rates of food inflation in the world, but it's hitting us hard. And their solution: stop taking action on climate change, which is the very thing that is driving that problem, Mr. Speaker. The reality is they would cancel the rebate people would get, and yes, they would attack, as an example, 3.5 million seniors who are going to get dental care. They want to take that away. That's what they're really about.
Interesting. Kind of got fired up there a little bit. Easy, bud.
London.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping we can get the minister back to the conversation. Thanksgiving is normally a joyous celebration for families. However, this year, 7 million Canadians are struggling to put food on their table. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government and across Canada, food bank visits are skyrocketing, with our highest level in Canadian history, according to the CEO of the Canadian Food Banks. This Prime Minister is worth not the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower prices or will he break his promise to all Canadians?
She had 6 cups of coffee. Triple sugar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And our government is focused on lowering grocery prices, and we have legislation on the table that will do that. But what are the Conservatives focused on? Well, in Alberta, they're trying to pull out of the Canada Pension Plan, Mr. Speaker. Canadians who have contributed their whole lives to the CPP. Seniors who have contributed their whole lives to their pensions are having the rug pulled out from under them. Mr. Speaker, will the Conservative leader stand up in this House and tell his colleagues to keep their hands off of Canadians' pensions?
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière.
Don't touch my pension.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal government, after 8 long years of disastrous management, the government introduces
a funny kind of drama
Tax
about
2.0 with the help of the Bloc, who want to radically increase the carbon tax by voting for it twice. Mr. Speaker, if you vote for the Bloc, you'll pay for it.
His face.
You'll pay for it when you get your groceries, when you get gas, and so on. Why doesn't the Liberal government cancel its second Quebec carbon tax supported by the Bloc twice?
It's a good question. They're paying a lot of taxes in Quebec. Man, oh man.
The Honourable
Second carbon tax, imagine.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all,
Justin Trudeau. It's handsome.
There is no federal carbon tax in Quebec because Quebec is a leader in combating climate change. Canadians are concerned about the cost of living and by climate change at the same time, and by the impact of natural disasters on our health and our economy. That's why we created a system that puts a price on pollution to meet their concerns. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The programs just aren't working, guys. Do you think they'll work? What do you think?
Mr. Speaker, we're facing an unprecedented housing crisis caused by the Liberals and Conservatives. In fact, we're seeing tents pop up more quickly than affordable housing. People are living in mold-filled apartments, but they can't move because they have nowhere to go. People are suffering, but we know that there are solutions. Will the Liberals buy land and build housing on it that actually meets people's needs? Will they use public lands for public housing? Will they build social housing, housing co-ops, and community housing?
Speaker, I agree entirely with the need my honourable colleague has flagged to build more affordable housing. I agree that we should be using federally owned land to achieve that outcome. I agree that we should continue to make the investments under the National Housing Strategy that is now responsible for the construction or repair of nearly 500,000 homes across this country. I'll be the first to acknowledge that over the course of the past number of decades, governments of both Liberal and Conservative persuasion did not do what was necessary to get the job done. We changed that in 2017. We will continue to make the investments necessary to ensure that everyone in Canada has a place to call home.
He'd have trouble talking if he had his hands in his pockets, I think. Wouldn't be able to say a word.
Canadians, particularly Jewish, Polish, and Roma Canadians whose family members were murdered by Nazis, demand answers. Meanwhile, the
back up,
Liberals
the old Nazi
sit on a
gate.
secret report from Nazi war criminals who were welcomed into Canada after World War II. Mr. Speaker, we can learn from the lessons of the past and heal if this Liberal government is intent on keeping those secrets safe. So, will the Liberal government release the Deschamps report so Canadians can finally know who these Nazi war criminals were that were welcomed into Canada?
It's a good question. People deserve to know. Right? Do you feel like you need to know?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
I'm not going to do anything.
Over the past 10 days in the House of Commons was completely unacceptable and embarrassing for all of us. The former Speaker of the House accepted full responsibility and resigned, which was the honourable thing to do. The Prime Minister apologized in this House. Our country has a dark history with respect to Nazis in this country, which is particularly hurtful to all Holocaust survivors, particularly the Jewish community in this country.
That's a good answer.
Senior officials and civil servants are looking carefully
from
at the
a piece of
Deschamps Commission
paper.
report and will be making recommendations soon on the options that are available. Merci.
All right.
Honourable member from Kitchener South, Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians are feeling the high cost of inflation. No family should have difficulty making ends meet and putting food on the table. Since 2015, our government has made significant investments to support Canadians and make life
interesting
more
to
affordable.
read.
Can the President of the Treasury Board share what our government is doing to ensure that Canadians are getting the support they need while supporting a strong economy?
That's all she had to do with her whole day.
President of the Treasury Board.
And she had to
Mr. Speaker,
read.
félicitations. I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for her question today. Our government has always been there to support Canadians, whether it's through the CEBA loan, Mr. Speaker, the grocery rebate, Mr. Speaker, the Canada Child Benefit, and the Canada Dental Benefit. The fact of the matter is we'll continue to invest in Canadians while prudently managing the
Sean is
fiscal
back there
purse.
dancing.
And
You
we
can
will
see,
make
like,
sure
he's
that we are
always
creating jobs and building a strong economy for this country, Mr. Speaker. That's our goal, and we'll continue to work hard for Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member from South Shore, St. Margaret's.
After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, the price of everything is skyrocketing. Dalhousie University's food
It's like Ric
price
Flair of
report
the
states
WWE.
that 64% of Canadians
Parliament.
are altering their food
Except he hasn't been
buying
around that
habits, moving to dollar stores for groceries and buying less nutritious food. 20% or 3% are eating less. The report blames energy and input costs for this food crisis. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower food prices by Thanksgiving, or will he break his promise to Canadians?
Not much was original about that. Come on. You guys got better players than that.
Secretary.
There are a number of measures that we have put on the table that will stabilize grocery prices.
It is more
that
fun
will
when
build
Trudeau's
more
in the
homes
House.
this country, and consistently, what we've seen from the Conservatives.
It's more fun when Lemonface,
Thankfully, this
Christie
morning,
is in the
we had a
House.
Conservative member stand up in this House and say that he was supportive of the government's legislation and that he would be voting for it. And so I wonder, are there other Conservatives
They're all playing
on
hooky.
their bench that are also of that view, and perhaps they could get together and speak to the Conservative leader, because I believe it's actually the Conservative leader that wants to delay help to Canadians.
My response would be every time, no matter what the question was, would be like, why did you recommend
Yes or
crypto?
no to my question, so I'll try again. Food Bank
Doing
Canada
better,
stated that
Rick.
at
Doing
this
better.
time of year, the number of people turning to food banks is growing. And what happens is that people are forced to make impossible choices. Choices like paying rent or buying food. NDP Liberal food inflation is driving food bank usage to its highest levels since Pierre Trudeau 42 years ago. After 8 years, the Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister lower food prices
Running out
by
of steam, though.
Thanksgiving, or will he break his promise to Canadians again?
I think Rachel there beside him must have winked at him between
Mr. Speaker, Speaker, I find it curious that my honourable colleague is standing up only now to defend the interests of low-income families who might need the services that food banks provide, when his party, over the course of my time in this chamber, has consistently voted against the measures that would make life more affordable for them. I look back to when we first formed government, when we raised taxes on the wealthiest 1% and cut them for the middle class, and they voted against it. When we changed the Canada Child Benefit and stopped sending checks to millionaires so we could put more money in the pockets of 9 out of 10 Canadian families, he voted against it. Every step of the way, including voting to support, opposing support for food banks during the pandemic, they couldn't get behind it. Will he now vote for the measures that can have a direct impact on the price of groceries and support C-50?
Interesting question. You should see him with glow sticks. You should see sexy Sean go with glow sticks. Sean Slick. Little bow tie. Clifford Small has a little bow tie.
Is at a 42-year high. Well, make no wonder, according to the PBO, carbon tax 1 and 2 is going to cost households in my province an extra $2,166 per year. After yesterday's vote,
his shirt is also
Atlantic
tight.
Liberal MPs voted to support this suffering. Folks back home say this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will this NDP Liberal government finally be the servant and not the master and axe the tax?
Axe the tax. The coalition government's an issue, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The agri-food sector has endured more extreme weather events, particularly in the province of that member. That's increasing severe and frequent storms, soil erosion, sporadic and unpredicted rainfall, higher than ever temperatures, including here in Ottawa in the last 3 days. Mr. Speaker, that all results from climate change. But as farmers always do, they've persevered and they've developed and implemented more environmentally friendly on-farm practices, and they've reduced their emissions. Our government is supporting them every step of the way through that process, and we'll make sure that we continue to be there for farmers and consumers when it comes to lowering food prices.
All right. He is well spoken and he's really pretty. Right? You not find that he is?
Years, Mr. Speaker, the member for Milton should be able to do a better job than that with answering a question. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians want answers. According to CTV's news report, many will not be able to afford a turkey dinner this Thanksgiving. With vegetables and turkey up around 70%.
Don't you worry about it, little fella.
The NDP Liberal carbon tax is now taking food off tables. So will the costly coalition listen to the Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador and axe the tax? Here, here, here.
It's easy to be the heel side, right? No matter what you do, like you're just trying to get a rise.
Newfoundland won't say is that next week climate action incentive payments will be arriving in the bank accounts of his constituents, and he should make sure that they know that's coming. Mr. Speaker, if that member really believes in affordability, then he ought to vote for Bill C-56 and the Atlantic Accord, which he's standing against. But Mr. Speaker, this is not your parents' Conservative Party. Mr. Speaker, the Progressive Conservatives stood up against things like acid rain and created solutions. But this Conservative leader, the member from Carleton, doesn't believe in climate change. He's spun on his heels. They've ditched progressive values, and they don't care about fighting climate change or fighting for lower grocery prices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
They're hiding behind the environment. That was, I kind of like that guy, but that was a crap answer.
The honourable member for Avignon, Lamitis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker,
hubba. Yeah.
September 2023 was the hottest month ever recorded.
Bloc Quebecois, read it from paper, though.
The in the Gulf of St. Lawrence reached record levels. These are unprecedented ocean heat waves. In the Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean region, there are plantations that were planted to limit our carbon footprint, but they burned during the wildfires.
So many have.
And meanwhile, a report tells us that the federal government will increase oil production to record levels in the next 2 years. It will open the floodgates of its Trans Mountain pipeline in January. It's very discouraging. How is it that the Minister of the Environment doesn't realize this?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I agree
with
my colleague that it's very important to reduce our impact on the environment. That is why our government has set a threshold for oil and gas sector emissions. And we have continued with our plan for emissions reduction. Oil and gas companies, Mr. Speaker, have proved on numerous occasions that they are capable of innovating,
losing points by
and implementing new competitive technology. Thank you. The honourable member for Repentigny.
They don't prepare for these things?
Mr. Speaker, it's 30 degrees in October.
Something
is not right.
She goes
Mr.
sometimes
Speaker.
well. She goes well sometimes.
More and more experts believe
Daniel
that
Negreanu
the
above me.
1.5 degree increase that we wanted to avoid even by the end of the century will actually be passed by 2030. But, as the Minister of the Environment likes to point out, Canada is an oil-producing country. And instead of reducing our production,
bright blue.
we will be increasing it and breaking all of our previous records within 2 years. Canada is throwing fuel on the fire. The Minister of the Environment used to be a green activist. Is this really the legacy that he wants to leave?
Rolling up her cuffs. Just getting ready.
Secrétaire
What we got?
The Honourable
Okay.
Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we take climate change and the fight against it very seriously.
Doppelganger out there for this lady. I know somebody that looks very remarkably similar.
Our government has made the commitment to reach
Doesn't
net
look like a
zero
politician.
by 2050. And if the Bloc
Sleeveless.
Québécois cares so much about this topic,
It's Friday
I'd
night
like
somewhere.
to ask why the leader of the Bloc Québécois, when he was the Quebec Minister of the Environment, said without hesitation that the government of Quebec intended to go forward with developing the oil industry in Quebec. I'd like to get
That's
an answer to
an interesting
that question.
pattern on her dress as well.
The honourable
outfit.
the honourable member rather for Louis Saint Laurent.
Sleeveless. Imagine
Mr. Speaker,
sexy
after
Sean
8 years
Fraser,
of this liberal
sleeveless.
government, we
Gerard.
see that mismanaging public funds is really their brand. Journalist Daniel Leblanc from Radio-Canada tells us that the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada Fund has spent nearly $40 million in a sloppy manner, and this shouldn't surprise anyone.
Sloppy.
Because when the bosses are behaving like this, when the government mismanages everything, well, it makes sense that everyone underneath the bosses is going to do the same thing. When will this Liberal government finally show some common sense in how it manages public
He
funds?
got himself in trouble the other day. He had to
Honourable
apologize.
Le député Louis Saint-Laurent
All
pour
right.
sa-
He's rested. He's
I'd like to
back
thank the
from
member
being
for this question.
rehydrated, ready to go.
And we need to remind Canadians of the facts, Canadians who are watching today.
Go, Francois.
As soon as allegations were made, we asked for an arm's length expert report, and on the basis of that report, we took action. And we required that a plan be immediately implemented, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have the highest level of governments in that fund. We expect the highest level of governments from all institutions managing public funds. The honourable
He's
member for
tired.
Louis Saint Laurent.
Once you just rehydrate,
Mr. Speaker, it's very
takes a
interesting
while
to hear what
before
the minister said.
your juice
But
comes
the
back.
problem is that it's always the same thing with this government. Every time they're caught with their hand in the cookie jar, then they suddenly
Bourgeois.
do something. But actually, the alarm bells had been ringing for a long time, but the government didn't do anything. Now the government is saying we need accountability and serious management. Does this government believe in the current management of this fund, who are responsible for the problems that we're talking about?
Good job. He's intense today, man.
The honourable
He
minister.
was hot the other day. He was
Mr.
flipping
Speaker, there's no cookie jar in this situation. We're talking about serious allegations. It was the government that asked for the report. We were the ones who asked to ensure that we could actually have an inquiry into the allegations, and then to create a system with the highest level of rigorous governance, Mr. Speaker. That's what Canadians expect from us, and that is what this government expects from all institutions managing federal funds. We will ensure that taxpayers' money is properly managed.
Not got a lot of
After 8 years
endurance.
of
His
this NDP Liberal
endurance is
government,
poor.
they've made it absolutely clear that they intend to censor what
Rachel-
Canadians can see, hear, and post
Rachel
online.
Thomas.
They are hell-bent to make sure that this is the case. My colleagues and I brought forward a very common-sense motion today in committee asking that the minister come and answer questions with regards to her new podcast registry. This podcast registry, of course, is moving forward under the government's current censorship legislation. The response was this. The NDP, the Liberals, and their Bloc allies all voted down our motion. They don't want to hear. They don't want to ask questions. They don't want to understand. They don't want to give Canadians a voice. In fact, one might refer to them as the censorship coalition. Why is this government so hell-bent on censorship?
Kind of like the WWE. I find it is like not the stuff in the ring, but the rest of it, the show. It's funny. Here we go. Who we
Mr.
got?
Speaker, let's hear what
Oh my
experts
God,
have
it's
to say
a
about
brawn panties match.
what the CRTC published. Mr. Professor
Go for it,
Pierre
ladies.
calls the conservative
Coming out in
argument
their
a complete
bathrobe.
disconnect with reality. He says it's clear it was not
English.
intended to control what users see or post
She can
online.
read
He
English.
calls the CRTC process a mere formality. He said, as a teacher, if a student wrote this in an exam, I put a big 0 on his exam. You really don't have to be able to read to say something as pathetic as that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What do you got?
L'honorable député de Saint-Laurent,
You're kind of slow, Greg.
For Saint-Léonard Saint-Michel.
What do we got here? It's a colorful top. That's purple. I think the other lady was wearing
After
mauve.
years of inaction from the Conservatives, this government finally adopted a system to protect passengers' rights, with a set of obligations that all
So
air
what's
transport
going on here
companies must
is she's
respect.
teeing up her own side.
In order to
Another
strengthen
liberal's
that
going to
system,
speak and
further
tune up
measures
to
were
what
adopted
she's
in Bill
saying, make it sound really
C-47
good.
to create stricter regulations.
So this is pushing some regulation.
Stricter regulations on air transport companies to
Air
ensure that
transport companies,
passengers will
okay.
always be protected. Can the minister tell
Not
us
my
about
biggest
this?
concern, personally. Who can afford to travel?
L'honorable ministre.
All
Mr.
right.
Speaker, I'd like to thank my friend and colleague for her question.
Most interesting man in the
Canadians work
world.
hard, they save and they put aside money for their holidays or to go visit loved ones. That's why our government was the first to protect passengers' rights. We strengthened our passengers' rights by making
See
compensation
that though?
mandatory
That
for
a
most
liberal asked a liberal that
by ensuring that the responsibility
the
falls
worst part is
on the companies,
they're
not
they
passengers.
were both
and
reading
by
from sheets.
creating
So
standards
it's boring
that apply in case of disruption
and
to
they're
travel.
bad at
we
it.
were the
Like,
first
what
government
would you
to
do with
be
your
there
morning
and
if this
stand
is
up
all
for
you were
Canadian
doing all
passengers,
day?
And we will continue to do so.
Prepare. Make it interesting.
L'honorable député de Colton Trail, Eagle Creek.
Week.
After 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, Liberal insiders have never had it so good, and Canadians are paying the price. We've learned that the RCMP is investigating allegations of misconduct involving 3 companies that worked on the ArriveCan app. They paint a picture of cozy relationships between this government and questionable contractors. Sweetheart deals for the Liberal insiders while Canadians struggle to make ends meet. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will the Liberal government come clean on their unethical behavior and quit lining the pockets of Liberal insiders?
It's a good question. I'm concerned about that, and they're 15%, or pardon me, cutting the GST on apartment builders, rental builders.
In the chamber with you and the chair,
Where
and
does
I
that
want to congratulate you sincerely on your appointment.
Yeah, I like this
Mr. Speaker,
justice guy.
misconduct of any kind in procurement
Mr. Justice,
processes
he's
is
all right.
never acceptable.
Speaks well.
We're aware of the RCMP's ongoing investigation into these serious allegations. To protect the integrity of the investigation, we will not be providing any further comment at this time.
Well, that's kind of a cop-out, maybe.
Député de Mission
Boring
Metzky,
answer.
Fraser Canyon.
You just lost
Speaker,
points.
after 8
Nice
years,
tie.
This NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. Statistics Canada reports the number of businesses closing shop in Canada is greater than the number of businesses opening. In August, there was a 37% increase in business insolvencies year over year. This is the highest it's been in recent history. Canadians are losing confidence at an alarming rate in their ability to do business in our country. So my question is this: why has the government turned a blind eye to the looming crisis of declining entrepreneurship in our country?
Big business doesn't want entrepreneurship.
L'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, I want the small business owners of Mission Maskey Fraser Canyon to know that their Conservative
Richie
Member of
Valdez,
Parliament
huh?
has voted
Small
against
business.
cutting taxes for growing small businesses, voted against lowering credit card transaction fees by up to a quarter, voted against supports for diverse and underrepresented entrepreneurs. Common sense does not mean voting against supports for small businesses, Mr. Speaker.
So many people reading from paper today. I apologize for that. Well, no, I don't apologize, but I'm sorry.
Excusez-moi, l'honorable
It makes me
député de Mission Metzky, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, that Liberal minister knows as well as I do that many of the problems facing small businesses in our country are a direct result of that party's governance and their negligence. Higher inflation, higher payroll taxes, higher carbon taxes, higher commercial rents, a labor crisis, more red tape, and a botched CEBA repayment plan that confused thousands of entrepreneurs across our country. All of these factors hurt our job creators and business confidence in our country. When will this government begin taking these problems seriously?
Going pretty slow today, man. Subscribe if you can. check this. We'll be here every day. We're doing this.
Mr.
All the
Speaker,
question
the
periods.
leader of the opposition called the supports we provided small businesses big fat government supports. He's literally mocking the idea that we stood up for small businesses in the time of their need. In the middle of the pandemic, small businesses were worried about keeping their doors open, keeping the lights on, and keeping their teams employed. Thanks to our government, we stepped in their darkest hour and delivered supports like the Canada Emergency Rent and Wage Subsidy, hardest hit business, tourism, hospitality recovery programs, and the CEBA loans. I am proud of the fact that we are there for them, Mr. Speaker. So while the leader of the opposition mocks the support we provided small businesses, we will continue to have their backs.
Oh, a little bit of fire at the end of that one. A little bit of fire. Not impressed so far. Not impressed with Richie.
Député de Scarborough Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every week Canadians are having to spend
Congratulations,
more and more on
some of you
just to
can
feed
read
their
from
families.
a book.
They are having to put off savings and even other essentials in order to keep putting food on the table. We recognize the global supply
So she's
chain
teeing one up
challenges
for the
and
Liberals
global
now.
inflation, but we need to acknowledge Canadian
This isn't one of my
families are having a
favorite
hard
parts,
time
but
right now.
look how
Could the
boring
Minister
this
of
is. She can make it
Innovation, Science and
exciting, being like
Industry
how
tell us
great
about
something
his
is,
meeting
and
with
then
the grocery
toss it off to
executives
somebody else. They
and what
take
we
the
are doing
baton
to
and
address
keep running.
affordability at the grocery stores.
Talking about groceries, spent her whole morning writing that piece, typing it.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank
Oh,
my colleague
let's
and
get it
actually
going.
all our colleagues here on this side because, you know, my voice was to express the frustration of millions of Canadians when I met the CEO of the grocery store. But the good news, Mr. Speaker, is today we presented a 5-point action plan. First of all, we have commitment from the grocery store. We're going to create the Office of the Consumer Affairs to help consumer, Mr. Speaker. We're going to make sure that the Grocery Code of Conduct is going forward. We're going to collect more data on the food prices in Canada. And, Mr. Speaker,
you're losing me,
we're going to
Francois.
fight for more competition. Every day is a good day to fight for Canadians. They should join us, Mr. Speaker,
Did he say
and make sure that we bring
they are gonna lower
stabilization in
grocery
price in
prices?
Canada for the benefit of all.
This guy. Come on. They're not answering the questions.
Mr. Speaker, this summer, 11 emergency rooms in Alberta closed due to the shortage of healthcare workers. And today, we learned
Heather's
that
fired
some
up.
Canadians are being forced to leave overcrowded emergency rooms without treatment due to no staff. The Liberals and the Conservatives
Bad
have
news right
failed
there. That's
to
a bad
protect
situation
Canadians
like that.
from
It's
conservative
all
leaders
over.
like Daniel Smith and Scott Moe, who want U.S.-style healthcare that will poach nurses and doctors from our public system. When will the federal government
man. That's a
stand
good
up
one.
for Canada's public
bad you're not
healthcare and
at
ensure our
work.
hospitals have the staff they need to care for Canadians?
L'honorable ministre de la Santé.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And standing up for public health care is what we have done over the last 8 years. It's certainly what we're going to do going forward. We made an investment of $200 billion in our health system, and we're making sure that not only does that money flow, but that there are indicators so that Canadians can see how health outcomes are improving for them in every corner of this country. We're going to make sure that these dollars go to make sure that we reduce wait times, increase doctors, increase nurses, and make sure overall Canadians get better health.
L'honorable député de Fort York.
Mr. Speaker, on the 112th National Day of the Republic of China, Taiwan, I reflected on a few facts. Taiwan's never held 2 of our citizens as hostages for 1,019 days. It hasn't intimidated Chinese Canadians or interfered in our elections or tried to buy off MPs or political parties. Mr. Speaker, Taiwan is a democracy. They don't have a president for life who won't hesitate to destabilize world peace or threaten Canada's bilateral trade as a coward Liberal government looks on. Can the government enlighten this House if there's been any new credible evidence for it to stand up for Canadians and combat foreign interference by the Chinese Communist Party, or is its new strategy to engage in a diversionary war with India?
It's an issue. Diversionary war with India. It's a bad situation.
L'honorable ministre.
Here we go.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Right.
I would like to,
All
of course,
right.
reassure
Missed
all
a
members
button.
in this House
Melanie
of the
Joly
importance
missed a button.
for us to counter any form of foreign interference.
You can see it.
That is why the Minister of Public Safety and myself have been working on this over the past months. And of course, we all know that Justice Hug has been appointed to be in charge of the inquiry.
We've got to make it
that
fun.
being said, I must also say that
we're doing.
we'll continue to work with within our Indo-Pacific strategy, and we have our China
She
framework.
did miss a button, though. See that? You can see it. So that's not just me. Like,
Cela nous amène à la fin de la
I'm just
période des
telling
questions
you that she
orales.
missed it.
Cependant, collègues,
Whoever colleague.
oh, what do we got here? That's the end of that. So that's what we're doing, guys. We're watching question period, doing commentary, having some fun as we go, learning, listening, being in tune with the issues across Canada. Most people don't know how any of our systems work. We'll learn together, have some fun along the way. That's it. So subscribe, like, if you can. That would be appreciated. Yeah, question period. My name's Ehren. We're watching Canadian Clown Services. That graphic will be different tomorrow. Anyhow, guys, we're wrapping up for today, and it's been a lot of fun. We'll be back tomorrow. Check us out.